Okay, we're on. Hello and welcome to the Shaping Futures podcast. I'm Kritika Bagaria, a mentor to high school students to help them onto a path of purpose and passion with the aim to ultimately help them land up in their dream colleges. The Shaping Futures podcast is essentially for us to interview change makers and experts in the field of education to inspire our students to take action. Today, we have with us Richa Wahi, who's a creative writing expert and a beloved teacher who turns her students into word munchers. So thank you so much, Richa, for joining us today.
Thanks, Kritika, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be doing anything with you.
Likewise, and let me just tell my audience that Richa is not only someone who I thoroughly respect, but is a dear, dear friend. And I could not be more excited to have her on the very first episode of the Shaping Futures podcast. So, Richa, the first question is something that you and I have always spoken about, which is, students coming up to us and asking us what they could potentially do with a degree in writing. And yeah. I'm pretty sure that at the time, you were thinking about what you should be doing, in terms of college, in terms of your master's. Probably these doubts came in your mind as well. So please tell us and share with us how you and your family navigated through this decision-making process.
So when I wanted to study creative writing, I went to the UK to Cardiff University because the degree was a teaching and practice degree. And at that point of time, I didn't realize that the teaching element would actually be shaping my career in the future. However, when I said I want to study creative writing, I think my father was very supportive. So was my mother. But my father got advice from a lot of people as to why was he wasting his money sending me to study creative writing.
Right.
And he was told, like, why don't you send her for MBA? And he was like, she won't pass. She doesn't want to study MBA. Let her go and study what she wants. And the question that came up from a lot of people was that, well, what is she going to do with creative writing?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that's changing slowly because creative writing has a lot of potential. You can get work in media for sure. With journalism, with advertising, a lot of writing in advertising is basically, it's the crux, right? Like if
Absolutely.
you can't write, how do you make your copy and your ads? So journalism, definitely advertising, copywriting. Yeah. I also feel like, now thanks to my own experience, the whole joy of teaching creative writing has come into play. And I couldn't have thought of a better career for myself, at least, when I'm teaching creative writing to so many kids and a couple of adults who want to write novels.
Right.
Also, I think, with writing, publishing houses open up doors. So there's editing options. You could work with publishing houses. And of course, abroad, you have the option of literary agents. So if you're someone who's familiar with writing and reading, those kind of options open out. So I don't think like creative writing is something that one needs to fear as a degree. Like it will translate into opportunities. That's for sure. May not be the most conventional opportunities, but definitely there are opportunities.
Right. So was this an active dialogue you had to have, with your parents? Because I believe that, your sibling and other people around you have done, the so-called safe careers like finance and, conventional marketing. And when you were going on to this path of writing, today you're looking back and saying, hey, there are so many options. But maybe at the time, did you doubt yourself? And what do we say to students also who are actively then doubting themselves?
So very honestly, I didn't even think of a career when I studied creative writing.
Right.
I have studied English literature. I have a degree in advertising and marketing with a specialization in copywriting. And I was all set to do advertising.
Yeah.
And I was living in Bombay at that time. And I came back to Calcutta, and that was career suicide. Because people said, if you want to do advertising, why would you leave Bombay and come to Calcutta? And then I looked around for jobs. I wasn't able to get anything that was up my alley. I started with some content writing and editing, and I was doing, reports and all, but there was no thrill in it.
Right.
And I had an altercation with my boss and I left. I think that was a blessing because around that time, I got to know of a degree called creative writing. Wow. And I always wanted to write. Since I was a child, I wanted to write. I just didn't know what kind of job does a writer do? Because, traditionally you're used to seeing parents go to office.
Yes.
I wasn't very clear how a writer works, how a writer earns, which office does he or she go to?
Yeah.
My Nanaji was a writer. He used to write in Hindi, but he passed away while I was growing up. Okay. So the only source of guidance that I could have had wasn't available to me. So when I saw this in the newspaper, in fact, I found it by chance, and I went to my parents and I said, I think I want to study. I don't want to work anymore. I want to study. And my father was like, hallelujah, please go. Like, they were very keen that I should get like a degree from abroad. So I said, I want to study creative writing. And they said, we have no idea what it is, but if you want to do it, figure out how to get admission and go. Sure. So I had a lot of support from my parents. The questions came from the so-called well-wishers.
Sure.
They were very worried about my future and whether I'd have a job and whether, I'd be employable. And creative writing, which, by the way, sometimes I get asked if it improves handwriting. I can assure you it hasn't improved mine.
Lovely. So
so I think for students who are passionate about writing, I mean, if it's something that you really want to do, then I think you're going to find ways to use it in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're going to be actively looking for opportunities in the space that you're passionate about, in this dynamic world, I'm just so sure, like you said, there will be opportunities that will open up.
Absolutely.
And if there aren't any available, you will make them available for yourself. Absolutely. Yes. Brilliant. And, with that spirit, moving on to our next question, which is, an essential part of writing is reading and accumulating ideas to be able to imagine. And we're living in a world of swiping and hashtags. And, very often, when I ask students about reading and how much they read or how often they read, they express a strong dislike for reading. Yes. So how are you inspiring your students to read better so that they can ultimately write better?
I think from my own experience, what I will say is that it should start at home.
Yeah.
And it should start when you're young. You have to sow the seeds. Because I grew up in a house where there were always books around us. There were always books. Like it was unnatural not to have a library at home.
Yeah.
And what we saw as we were growing up was that the library was used by members of our family.
Correct.
My grandmother she read in Hindi, but she read the whole newspaper. She read all magazines.
Yeah.
So even Dadi, who hasn't had formal education, was a reader.
Right.
I have books in my library that are my grandfather's, my Nanaji's. Those books are older than I am. Okay. So we've always had a culture of the library being built by the family.
Sure.
So we had books that my father added to it. We had books that my mom had added to it. So our library is quite a mess because it has got every possible genre under the sun.
Right.
And it's got books in different languages as well.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing is for a family to be participating in the reading process as a whole.
Sure.
We often hear parents say, as a teacher, I hear parents say that my child doesn't read. And if I ask the mother, do you? And she's like, no, I don't like reading.
Yeah.
So children watch you.
Absolutely.
They watch what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you have a disdain towards reading, your child is going to pick it up. I hear things like, I'm too busy to read.
Yeah.
But your child is very busy as well.
Right.
So you have
reading is the first thing students give up, the moment STEM comes into their life. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know it's because it's not encouraged.
Yeah.
Like, I always tell moms that, if your child is small, read aloud to him. It's okay. Read aloud. Children love stories. We all love stories.
Absolutely.
So even if you're reading aloud to your child, that interest is getting generated. Then go into a barter system. I've been reading a story to you every day. Why don't you read out one to me tonight?
Lovely.
Start with that habit. Then go into partnership. I'll read one page, you read one page. Okay, now let's read in a funny voice. Let's make it into a game. Make it into a family bonding time.
Sure.
Also, another thing is, do not use reading as a punishment, which is the best way to kill your love for reading. Read a book, otherwise you can't go to play. I'm not going to let you use the computer till you finish reading 10 pages. You have just gone from making reading into from a pleasurable activity into a punishment one.
Yeah.
Read or else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would a child enjoy reading if you're using it as a threat?
Yeah. And they're only going to listen to your threats until a certain time. After that, they're not even going to care about it. So, yeah.
So I think that's very important to start young.
Yeah.
And constantly nagging a child that, you're not reading as per your standard, or your friends are reading higher standard books. Let the child read what he or she wants. The child will grow as he or she is ready.
Yeah.
You can't force a reading standard onto a child. If a child wants to read the same book 10 times, let him or her, when he's ready to move on to a new book, he will. She will pick up the kind of book she wants to read. Don't impose your choices on your child.
Sure. But how do you expose your children to interesting authors or interesting genres?
So maybe like you read out a story. For example, if I want to read a Russian fairy tale to a child, I could bring one. I could read it out to a child. I'm talking about younger children, of course.
Yes.
You can read it out to a younger child and say, you know, this is from Russia. And then you talk a little bit about Russia. Get the child inquisitive. You know, and then say, would you like to read another one? And then how about we take a challenge and read a story from every part of the world? And you it into an interactive system. Give the child a map, and every time they read a story from that region, they color it. So it becomes an activity. What I'm trying to say is, reading should not be an isolating activity. If you do it as a family project, if you do it as a way of bonding with your child, you will not have to do much after a while.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's a brilliant idea.
You cannot get a 13-year-old to start reading now, but you can get a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old to start reading.
So that they continue 13 and, you know, throughout their lives then. Yeah. Lovely. And I think that is something which is such an important part of, you know, I wouldn't even say just college applications, but in terms of life, in terms of being able to express yourself, in terms of being able to figure things out for yourself if you can't read. Yeah. So definitely reading is key, and it has to start very, very young. My next question to you, Richa, is that, say when students, you know, are in their 9th, 10th, 11th, and they have to start thinking about colleges and college applications, and we work very actively on, you know, helping students brainstorm on their essays together. Very often we find ourselves facing this challenge of getting the children to introspect and to be able to express their life experiences in impactful sentences. You know, so how can we get students to actively reflect and to think about, you know, their life's challenges, their life's achievements, you know, and how do we get them to start doing that throughout high school, probably starting class 9 onwards?
I think journaling is very important because, you know, very often we do things in our lives which we are doing in a matter of fact way without realizing that those are actually ideas that can be developed later into a longer essay for a college application. So if you're journaling on a regular basis, you have a book, a diary full of ideas. You know, so when you're lacking an idea, you go back through your journal and you can find so many points that can be starting points for something more. Also, I feel, you know, children need to learn how to identify stories in their life, because most kids are at that awkward age where they don't want to say they've done anything. Because when you talk to young kids, they'll say, oh, ma'am, I just went to college. I just hung around. I was a normal kid. Of course, you were a normal kid, but there must be something unusual about your life, even in that normal situation. So I think it's very nice to have a chat with kids about things that, you know, may be unusual. And then once they realize that that is an unusual part of their life and it makes them unique, ask them to jot down more and more thoughts about it. You know, like, for example, once we spoke to a girl who kept saying that she had nothing unusual in her life. And then it let slip that she had a 20-member family. I said, holy cow, who in today's world has a 20-member family? Like, how many members do you have in your house? And it started off with a joke like that. And that became the crux of her essay, where she spoke about adjusting with so many people.
Relationship management, conflict management.
Absolutely. So I think our lives are full of stories. We need to teach young people to recognize these stories and not to be inhibited to, you know, acknowledge that their lives are made up of stories. So journaling is a great way to put your thoughts down, your experiences down, you know, and you have it in class 9, you can refer to it in class 11.
And, you know, because it's so natural for students to forget something that had happened in the past, but maybe it was a significant moment in their lives that has led to all those then next things that have happened for them. Brilliant idea. And, you know, that's something also we are trying to actively encourage our students to do. And we hope to get more and more students to be able to do that. You know, the last question, Richa, is some words of advice, inspiration for students who want to be writers, who want to express creatively.
So writing is not easy for anyone who wants to write seriously. I think writing is very, very difficult for people who want to write seriously, but it is such a rewarding feeling the moment you have that complete story or poem on a piece of paper. So like with everything, the more you practice, the better you get at it. So give yourself a fixed time. Like if you can give yourself half an hour a day, and I'm saying half an hour because there are so many other commitments kids have these days, where you will just write.
Yeah.
That is your writing time. Even if you're writing rubbish, even if you're repeatedly writing that I don't know what to write.
Yeah.
But it is helpful to just write. And that habit forms. And when that habit forms from saying, I don't know what to write, you start writing. So it's very important to make that habit of writing every single day. I think that is the starting point. And then the second thing I want to say is that face criticism by distancing yourself from the piece. Understand that nobody is criticizing you. Your work is being critiqued, not criticized. Because if you can be mature enough to receive the criticism in a positive way, the critiquing of your work in a positive way, you can enhance your work.
Right.
If you take it to heart and you say, okay, she thinks I'm not a good enough writer, you will probably hesitate before you put your writing out into the world. And then the world gets deprived of reading your work.
Right. And how many people do you think one should go to for this kind of feedback and critiquing?
So I think it's very difficult to actually find enough people in life to constructively give you feedback.
Yeah.
And sometimes the people closest to you are the worst, because mom's going to like what you write always.
Right.
My mom's liked what I've written always.
Yeah.
So you need to find maybe at least 2 or 3 people in your life who are objective, who will tell you not only what is wrong, but also what is right.
Right. Yeah.
If something doesn't work, why it doesn't work, and if something works, why it works. You need to know your strengths as well as your weaknesses. So you can at least, use the feedback to repeat the positives and to improve on the negatives. So at least identify 2-3 people who you could go to and try and have them as diverse as possible.
Sure.
So you get different perspectives. And generally, I would say stay away from best friends, stay away from families, because they're always going to love you and by default love what you do.
Sure.
That's not helpful.
Right. And sometimes I've also, seen pieces of writing or general projects, which are really, really good. But if we overdo this feedback loop, we end up just getting confused in the feedback that we're getting, because whenever we go to someone for criticism, the idea is we have to point out too many negatives. So I really like that you said positives also, please.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
You have strengths as a writer, and you need to learn those strengths.
Yeah. Lovely. So thank you so much, Richa. I really hope that some of the points discussed here can inspire our students.
I hope so too.
Yeah, help them write better and help them read better. Thank you so very much for your time. And this is always going to be so special, our very, very first podcast episode with Richa Wahi of Word Munchers. Thank you so much
for having me here, Kritika. I really enjoyed my session with you.